Welcome to Chapter 9, Language Development. In this chapter, we will have 7 videos covering each of these learning objectives. The first video will look at the aspects of language. The second will look at language in the brain. The third will look at theories of language development. The fourth video looks at stages of language development. The fifth will look at literacy, which is basically reading and writing. The sixth video will look at bilingualism and bilingual education. And the seventh video will look at language disorders. So let's begin this first video by looking at the basic aspects of language. You have this nice chart in your book that goes over the 5 basic aspects of language. This is on page 314, table 9.1. And you can see that we can break language down into its phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. Let's go over each of these briefly. So the phonology of a language is the study of the sounds of a language. Phonemes represent the smallest distinct sounds in a particular language. So all the individual, broken down sounds that we use within a language. So if you look at the word go, it has 2 phonemes, g and o. Check has 3 phonemes, ch, e, k. Shine has 3, sh, I, n. So a phoneme doesn't correspond to a particular letter necessarily. In some cases it may, but we have approximately 42 phonemes in the English language, although we only have 26 letters. Because some of the vowels, as you know, have more than one sound associated with them. And also there are combinations of letters that make up distinct sounds like CH or CK or SH. Those are considered phonemes. They're individual sounds of the language. So don't think of this as like just the letters of the alphabet, but all of the phonological sounds, all the sounds that you can hear within a language make up the phonemes. Different languages have different sets of phonemes. So for instance, we have an R and an L sound in English, or L. And anyways, but these 2 particular distinct sounds are not found in Asian languages. This is why it's not uncommon for people that are learning English that come from an Asian country to sometimes mix up their R's and L sounds because they don't have those 2 categories within their language. Similarly, English is missing the DD differentiation that's involved in the Hindi language. They have 2 different sounds of D, which we do not have. So what happens is when you hear one of these D sounds in Hindi versus the other D sound in Hindi, you could not tell them apart. They will both sound like duh, duh, they will sound similar to you because your brain will categorize them into one category because we don't have that in our language. But anyone fluent in Hindi will be able to tell the difference. It's similar to they also have a TT distinction in Hindi. 2 different T sounds that we don't have in the English language. We only have one. And so once again, when you hear them, you will have trouble differentiating between the 2 different T sounds, whereas a native speaker will not have that trouble. So each language has its own set of phonemes, the basic units of sound, and your brain in development organizes around the particular phonemes of your language so that you learn to very well differentiate the sounds within your language, but not the sounds outside of your language. So even though I speak differently than each of you, if I say dog, you can hear my d and o and g sound. Even though when you say dog, it actually sounds very differently. I mean, I might have a certain accent. I might say it a little bit differently. I might pronounce my letters differently, but we become very good at organizing the phonemes of the language that we learn, our native language that we learn from growing up as an infant. And so our brain categorizes those sounds. This is one of the things that makes it a little bit difficult at times to learn a second language later in life. Our brains can't learn to organize and categorize the sounds of our native language. And so when you're introduced to a new language, you may not have the precise categories in your brain to hear all of the sounds of the new language that you're learning. Okay, so that is phonemes, the sounds of language. Then we get to morphology. Morphology is the way that words are formed from sounds and how words are related to other words. So morphemes are the smallest units of meaning in a language. So they're not individual letters anymore, but they're small units of meaning. Well, they could be an individual letter, but okay, we'll get to that. Okay. So any root word is a morpheme. If you can't break it down any further, so like the word cat is a morpheme. It's not a combination of two other words. It's an individual word representing one thing, cat. Similarly, the word friend is what we call a root word. You can't break it down anymore. It's a single word that has one meaning. It's not a combination of other words. So individual root words are morphemes. Similarly, suffixes and prefixes are also separate morphemes. So when we look at the example of cats, it's two morphemes. It's got the root word cat, and then you add the S and it changes the meaning. So the S has meaning. It's a individual unit of meaning. It tells you that there's more than one cat. Similarly, if I take the word friend, I could add the suffix ly, and it becomes friendly, which is a different word with a different meaning. And if I wanted to, I could add the prefix un and make it unfriendly. That would be a combination of three morphemes. Once again, it changes the meaning. Friendly and unfriendly are obviously two very different words. Although they're similar in spelling and whatnot, but they have different meanings. So each morpheme carries a meaning with it. When I add un, it changes the meaning. If I add an s or an ly to a word, or an ed or an ing, it changes the meaning of the word. Those are morphemes, the smallest units of meaning. Then we have three more aspects of language. And these ones I'm going to just cover briefly. The syntax is the grammar of a language. The syntax or grammar tells us how words are put together in order to make sense. There are rules for putting words together. So I can't say John Bob hit, but I could say John hit Bob. It is the syntax of language that tells me, that the word order is important. And if John's actually hit Bob, I can't say Bob hit John. That means something very different than John hit Bob. Okay, anyways, hopefully I did that right. If I reverse the two nouns, Bob hit John versus John hit Bob, they mean something different. So the syntax tells us, which word, which noun is the action noun, which one's the recipient, or I don't know what the technical terms are, but it's a syntax that allows you to make sense of John hit Bob versus Bob hit John. Okay. The semantics of a language refers to the meaning of words and sentences and phrases. It's kind of like your mental dictionary that you carry around. So if I say the word democracy to you, you consult your mental dictionary, you come up with a meaning of the word. That is the semantics of the word. So you use your semantics to make sense of the words that you hear, based on the meaning of them. And finally, we have pragmatics. This is how language is used in different social situations, kind of like conversational rules in a sense. So early in life, you learn, for instance, not to talk out of turn, that one person talks and then another person talks, and you try not to talk over them. You learn, I don't know, not to keep changing topics when you talk. You should stick to one topic and allow people to respond, and then you can go on to another topic. But anyways, it's just basic kind of rules about how to use language. Think about it. You would talk very differently probably to your professor, to me, than you might to your friend. Probably more slang or I don't know, inappropriate language or something might be used with your friend versus talking to your professor. Similarly, if you compare talking to your friend to talking to, let's say, a 2-year-old, you're going to change your language once again. This is part of pragmatics. You change your conversational style depending on the audience. And this is something we learn growing up. It takes a while, actually. We're not experts at it, certainly in preschool years, but throughout our childhood, we get better and better at the pragmatics of language, learning how to change our speech depending on who we're talking to. And this will end video 1 of chapter 9.